Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, my guest is Amber Hayes, and you guys, she has an amazing story. And I always say we all have a story, and that's why I love having this podcast. But it's how we not only tell our story, but how we overcome and heal through our story that matters. And so I'm really grateful that you took the time out today to come on and share your story. I know it's already inspiring others, and just I can see you guys. If you're listening to the audio, you can't see her. Make sure you go watch the video. But she's just, you can tell when someone has not only endured trauma, but has gone through the healing journey. Like, you're just you're like a breath of fresh air. So I want you to know that about yourself, in
Thank
case
you.
no one has told you that today.
Aw, thank you so much. You made my Thursday.
Aw. Well, I do appreciate you being here, and thank you for reaching out and wanting to tell your story on this platform. I know that the listeners are going to love it. You guys make sure you follow her. I will say it again at the end, but Amber, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. I would love to just open it up to you and just allow you to share as much as you would like to, about some of the things that you've endured in your life and what steps you've taken to kind of break through the toxic cycle that we tend
Right.
to find ourselves in.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much once again. I do want to share, I guess this is my book. It's called The Obedient Daughter.
Yes.
It has been out for a month now. You can find it at Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Yes.
There's plenty of other sites that you can find it on. It's if you go to ambernicolehayes.ca, it's everything is linked there and a little bit more about myself.
Yes. And your
But
website is beautiful, by the way. I just want to say that
oh,
real quick. She has an
thank
amazing
you.
website, you guys. So make sure you check it
Thank
out.
you. Thank you so much. Yeah, so for me, I think it was as common, right? During COVID, we went through a period where everything shut down, right? It
Mhm.
was just the noise of, life with kids, activities, work. We were glued to our computers, our Zoom calls, those sort of things.
Mhm.
And in the off times, we found ourselves sitting, alone in our own thoughts. There was, copious amounts of divorce that were happening, families that were breaking apart. For myself, I found myself sitting in these recurring thoughts that I couldn't get rid of. And for me, those were the thoughts that I was raped when I was 12.
Mm.
And so it was a thought that for those 2 years, it was the first thing that came into my mind as soon as I woke up.
Wow.
And as COVID, as difficult as it was, right? Being so isolated, to have that just stirring inside of me, it was something
Mhm.
that I couldn't push down any longer. And so it was time for me to acknowledge it. And so I thought I could bury it for the rest of my life, as
Mm.
anybody does, right?
Mhm.
But I feel like it's when you hit that almost 40 standpoint that your life just
I say
decides
that
to,
all the time.
isn't that true though?
I
It's
say
like
I
we're gonna
always
blow
tell
up
people, I'm
your
like,
shit.
life starts at 40 and I'm in
Yes.
my mid 40s now. But it's
Yes,
like this, it is. It's like,
it
I've
is.
seen it in men too. So it's not just women,
No.
but it's like this shift that begins to start.
Yes,
So that's
yes, I
interesting. I'm
completely
glad you
agree.
brought that up.
It is and it's so funny because for me it definitely was that, and I feel like I've seen other people go through the exact same thing, and I'm
Hmm.
like, this is something. This is like
There's something
there's
there.
something to it, right? And I don't know if
Yes.
it's cognitively we would just reach that point of like, oh, is this all that my life is going to be? Right. Or,
Yeah.
some people decide to bury the noise and they just blow their lives up. And
Mm.
so for me, actually, I was very close to doing that. I started antidepressants. My marriage with my husband, we were fighting a lot. We were distant. He was trying to hold on to his company and keep it alive. And, he was letting people go. And it was, a crazy time for him as well. And
Mm.
so him and I both, we were just, circulating together in this orb, but we weren't together. We were just side by side.
Right.
And so I felt like I wasn't heard and I felt like I wasn't seen. And so when these thoughts started coming up, I went through therapist after therapist because, it was like, oh, there's nothing wrong with you. It actually started to show as symptoms
Wow.
of MS for me. And so,
Okay.
yeah, so
My
my
mom had
limbs,
MS, so I know very much about
totally,
MS. Yes.
my limbs were numb, my eyesight
Mm,
was going crazy. I had chiropractors and GPs telling me it's got to be MS. Like we'll send you for all the tests and then we'll get started. And the test came back all negative.
okay.
And so that was when they're like, oh, you just must have depression. So, like,
I love
let's
how
put
they
you,
sugarcoat everything. Like
let's,
it's
yeah,
like, oh,
the
well,
medical
it's like
system.
you have to just diagnose it, right? And it's funny
Yeah,
because I was actually trying to become part of the medical system at one point. And then through my journey, that didn't happen, and now I know why, because that was
right.
the problem.
Yeah,
Like, that's
yeah,
what
totally.
started my whole journey of not going that route.
Right.
But
But,
it's
but
like they
like,
just diagnose it, and it's like
it's just
it's
label
like
it,
throwing
right?
darts at a wall and hoping that you hit something.
And hopefully it sticks, right?
Oh
And we're
my
just going to
gosh.
give you some Zoloft, and we're going to hope
Mm,
that just makes everything go away, and you'll do your thing. And so
wow.
yeah, that's exactly what they did. And um, it wasn't until my second therapist, because the first was like, oh, okay, let's do we're going to start working out, we're going to eat healthy, we're going to get fresh air. And I'm like, girl, that's not my problem.
You're
I
already
promise
doing that.
you. Yes. And so my second therapist was for like deeper, darker, long-term
Okay.
depression. And so she was actually the first person that gave me permission to think about my past and my history and the trauma that would be inside me. And she said, I want you to go deep and I want you to go dark and I want you to take this entire week and I want you to go deep inside and back to your childhood and really think about if there was anything that you didn't like that happened to you that made you really upset, things that you have just completely ignored for the last 40 years almost.
Right.
And I want you to sit in it as long as you can. And she said, it's going to get dark and it's going to be scary and I'm here for you.
I just got
And
chills as
so,
you said that because I know that.
right,
No,
you
I've
know
been through
that.
that too.
And
Yes.
but for somebody to say like it's okay for you to do that
Yeah.
was really, as oddly as enough, we say like you could be a 38-year-old adult, and for somebody to give you permission to do that, it's almost like that's what you really need, right?
Yes.
And for because nobody really wants to sit in it and nobody wants to think about it.
Right.
um but I did what she said, and it was 3 or 4 days in, and I hadn't told a single person about it. I had been just swarming in this trauma
Mm,
and this depression, and it was dark, and I was so filled with shame that
mm.
there's no way I could tell anybody about this. And so my husband and I went on a date, and we threw every dagger at each other. We were fighting so much, and I
Oh my
thought,
gosh.
I can't say, we're like, it's either I destroy my family or I
Mm,
come forth with this secret. And so at the end of that night, we were ready to get divorced. And it wasn't until the next morning, I had said to him the night before, I said, do you even want to know what I'm dealing with? And he said, no, I don't.
mm.
And because he thought it was something to do with my ex-husband,
Okay.
right? And so I said, okay, that's, that's made our decision right there. I guess I'm going to keep this a secret for the rest of my
Mm,
life. And so the next morning he said, okay, I've talked about it with my mom. I feel like we need to sit down and I need to hear you out. And so for the first time in 25 years, I spoke this secret. And I had this physical, visceral feeling of these bugs flying out of my mouth, like thousands and thousands of bugs, like a scary movie. It was crazy.
mm.
And I said, my brother raped me when I was 12.
Jesus.
And so after we had sat in it for a couple of days, I was able to acknowledge that it wasn't a one-time thing, that it was a time frame of 7 years from the ages of 5 to 12, and it was multiple times. And so it really started the healing process for me, and the acknowledgement that it actually had happened.
So you had never
And with
told anyone up to that point?
not a single person. Yeah. And so it, my brother, him and I were the only two people that had known about it.
Mm.
But yeah, so it was a matter of a week after that that all of my symptoms went away from my
Wow.
MS. And yeah, so it really kickstarted that healing journey of, what to do. And so I spoke to my therapist and she was
Ooh,
just like, oh my God, wow, okay. I didn't think I
right.
had that's a win. Like I didn't
Right.
know I had it in me. But yeah, so and then she passed me off to somebody else and we started EMDR and that sort of thing. But it goes through the whole process in the book of something that I don't know that I would recommend to anybody who's ever been through childhood sexual abuse,
Yeah.
and that was the confrontation to your abuser.
Mm.
And so every single book that I read said, don't do it. They can invalidate your feelings. It could reoccur trauma. You could, they could deny it and everything like that. And so
Yeah.
my family actually had a full-on intervention where we all sat in a circle, and myself and my brother, and we all said how we feel and how it's affected us, and which is not like my family at all. Like we never spoke a single feeling, never acknowledged anything.
Hmm.
And so he admitted everything and apologized for it. And
Okay.
so
So
it
nobody knew anything up to that point.
no, so I told my dad probably a week after. Him and I are very close.
Mm.
And he sat on it for about a week and then said, I need to tell your mom. And so my mom and I were never really close.
Mm.
She suffered from undiagnosed borderline and narcissistic personality disorder. And actually, she favored my brother our entire lives. And so it created this extremely toxic environment
Mm.
where, I was the person that was always doing the cleaning, trying to be the perfect daughter, doing well at school, just trying to appease her to receive any type of love or affection or admiration from
The
her.
obedient daughter.
That's right. And so he was the budding, jock, the football player in high school. Everybody thought he was just the golden boy. And
Mm.
so I spoke about that, and that it was my job to help him, do laundry, make his bed. I did all the chores and the cleaning and all that kind of stuff, clean the bathrooms. And,
Wow.
he'd be um, mowing the lawns at most or shoveling the sidewalks and then throwing the football. So
Mm.
it, it really was a different toxic environment that she created. And unfortunately, my dad was stuck in this toxic environment as well and was facing abuse himself.
Oh. Do you
So
think
there was
that's what brought you and him closer when you were growing up?
I do. I think I look to him as the safe parent, right?
Mm.
Like he was
Yeah.
the one, but at the same time, and I speak about this too, right? I him and he used to talk to me about his marital problems. And so I was almost a therapist to him. So I would say in that same moment, it was also like a stolen childhood, right?
Mm.
Because I wasn't able to be a young kid. I was giving advice to him, I was helping my brother, and I was my brother's muse per se, right?
Wow.
And then I was my mom's maid. So yeah, and actually I have
Girl.
an older brother who's 9 and he or 9 years older, and he was just kind of on his own, right? Like he
Mm.
was it was definitely a struggle. And so I guess the journey of all of it, when I escaped my brother and my mother, I ended up marrying an abusive man when I was 23. And so I had this moment. It was like, when you're in a relationship and you just embrace all of the red flags, like you
Yeah.
collect them as if they are like lucky pennies or something.
Right.
That's exactly what I did with him. But for
Yeah.
me, he was the lesser of three evils.
Mm.
So,
I don't want to gloss over that because what you
right,
just said is powerful.
right.
Because I think, and I've heard this a lot with, people that have gone through like traumatic childhood experiences.
Mhm.
And I can look at my own personal journey as well. And it's like we're just looking for something that's better,
Right.
but
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's healthy,
It
right?
doesn't mean
It's
it's a
just
good, right?
we're just looking at it like, well, that's better than this.
Yeah.
And
But it's
oof,
because you don't know what better is,
right.
right? Like, and you look at that and I think about, um, so going through sexual abuse and the everlasting effects of it, whether it be the promiscuity, right, that led me down that
Yes.
road through high school. And it's like, well, okay, I didn't value my body. I didn't have somebody to say, you shouldn't
Right.
lose your virginity at 15 because he's 17 and he wants to,
Right.
right? You don't have to keep appeasing all of these people in your life. And so I didn't know any better when it came
Right.
to what was good and what wasn't. And that healthy, I guess, marriage or relationship that I should have been, seeing, it just never was there.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
how did that journey, like, how did that evolve? Because I know he's
oh,
your ex now, so.
yeah. So we met in university, and within a matter of months, he was planning on going down to Las Vegas. He was a hockey player. And
Mm.
so he said, come with me. And I had just finished up university and thought, okay, great. Like, I want to get the hell out of here. Let's go down. It's going to be a matter who doesn't love Vegas, right? It's
Right.
nice and warm. We live in Canada. So it's like, perfect. Get
Yes.
me out of here. And so my parents basically couldn't say anything. And they knew I was going to take off without them or
Mhm.
without their approval. And so I did. So we went down there and yeah, it was a different experience, very much so. It turned into a lot of, the fights, it progressively got worse and worse and worse.
Mm.
And for me, I'm not a fan of strip clubs. Like it's, just that's who I am. It's too close to the line of cheating. I've seen some
Right.
things
Hmm.
and, those red flags, I just kept collecting them, the lies after lies,
Mm.
the things that he would do. Um, we ended up going down for 2 years. So we came back and we went back down again. But I had said, if I'm not going down without a commitment again. And so I got a phone call one day from the bank, and it was a sweet lady down south. And she said, hello, is this Miss Amber Nicole? And I said, yes. And she goes, are you aware of a $3,000 charge from Fred Meyer on your credit card? I said, well, I am now. And sure enough, he used my card to purchase an engagement ring.
Wait, wait, wait.
And yeah,
Wait a minute.
yeah,
So he used your credit card to
yes,
purchase your engagement ring.
yes, yes. And so it was funny actually, because when we were down there the first year, I had been working odd jobs with another girlfriend. Because I was Canadian, I was, under the table kind of thing. And so I
Mm,
was cleaning houses. I was doing all those kinds of things. And so
yeah.
she was sweet enough to, to help me tag along and, let me do whatever. And so she told me one day, she said, why are you with him? I want to let you know, like, you're such a nice girl, but he's cheating on you. And so I confronted him about it, and he's like, no, I'm not the one who's cheating. It's her boyfriend who's cheating on her. Like, we need to stay away from them. Like, I don't want you hanging out with her anymore. And then he came back
Mm,
from that trip a few days later with this Fred Meyer pamphlet with engagement rings just to love bomb me to death over it. And he's like, yeah, I got it at the grocery store. And I was like, what? And he said there was an engagement ring store connected to the grocery store. I'm like, well, great, thanks. This is amazing. So, sure enough, the next summer he had ordered it, used my credit card, and then had said, "Oh yeah, well, since you're so good at, everything, why don't you just, get it shipped here and organize it?" And he had it purchased in Alaska because there's no sales tax, but without thinking that there's taxes and duties once you import to Canada
yes.
anyways. So it didn't make any sense. And I ended up paying for all that myself
Oh
anyways.
my
And
gosh.
then I gave him the joy of opening the package, and he's like, well, you can't see it. I'm like, but I just paid, I just paid for it and had it shipped here. And okay. So it took him a couple of weeks to end up proposing, and it was, yeah, but the day that, I guess it was maybe a month before our wedding day, I found out that he had a secret Facebook account, and his
Mm.
name was Leo Getz. And he had a number of photos of himself and 5 women that he had been messaging back and forth. And so I said, well, what's with the name? And he said, because Leo gets what Leo wants. And so, believe it or not, that
Wow.
ginormous red flag, I still married him. It
But
was the
that's
month
very
after.
common. That's,
Totally.
you're
I,
not, your story, while it is your story,
yeah,
like there's
it's,
women go through this so much
yeah,
because
yeah,
again, it still looks better than what
right.
we had.
Because what's my alternative is that I moved back in with my parents. I'm under the
Mm.
roof of my mother. She's now controlling me and saying what I can and can. I can't afford to go out, right, and buy my own place. And so, and then she would be right, right? She
And
would be
that
the
I was
one.
about to say, yeah.
And
Because then you
that's
also
a
have
hard
to
pill to
admit,
swallow.
yeah, you have to admit, like, yeah, this
I'm a
wasn't what I
dumb,
thought it was, right? And then you
totally.
have to admit that to someone that you don't want to admit that to. That's
Right.
difficult.
It is.
Oh my
It
gosh.
is. So yeah, and she was never one to hold back her opinion on anything. So yeah, I still married him, and it was funny because the moment that like right before I walked down the aisle, I had this it was a crazy calming feeling. And it was one that I had never experienced before. And I don't know if it was, spirit guides or whatever. It was them telling me that I needed to go through with this marriage, that
Mm,
I knew it wasn't going to be my only marriage, but I needed to go through with it.
interesting.
And so for me, that kind of said, okay, like I can do this, I will get through this, and I know that I can move on after this. And
Wow.
so I did. We got married. We stayed married for 4 years. And it wasn't until I had um, an accident at work. I had fallen down 17 stairs, and I had a concussion. I had short-term memory loss. I had a broken wrist.
Wow.
I had bruises all over my face. And so it was the point in my life that I wanted him to be there to support me, and he wasn't. He was
Mm,
inconvenienced, and I felt more alone than ever.
wow.
And so that was the breakdown, I would say, of our marriage.
Mm,
We ended up moving 6 hours away from home out to Calgary because I had received a promotion. And so him and I became very competitive once we were married, that
mm,
who was the manager and who was the people manager. And I was just, you know, um, I was just an associate, and that was different than a manager. It wasn't good enough. And
mm.
so we moved out here, and I had gotten the promotion. And so that was another reason that we broke down as well. And we got into one of our largest fights, and he said, well, why don't you just have a baby and give it to me? I said, well, that's one hell of a
Okay.
gift, don't you think? Yeah, so I wanted to work on my career. I was only 25, and he wanted
Mhm.
a baby, and we could barely afford the house that we had. There was no furniture in it. We weren't making smart financial decisions. And so, and plus I knew that if I ever had a baby with him, it would be a struggle for me.
Mm,
He told me that if I ever got pregnant and tried to leave him, that he would chain me up to the water heater, leave me there until I had my baby, and then take it. So,
wow.
yeah. So I had vowed at that time, I said, I'm not having kids. I don't want kids. And it was just that I didn't want them with him. And I
Right.
knew that if I ever wanted to be the mother that I always thought I deserved, I couldn't do it with him.
Mm,
And so
wow.
he threw me on the bed, and then I came charging after him, and he pushed me down on the floor into the closet and locked me in there. And I laid there thinking, this can't be all that life is. It has to be better than this. And so there were so many moments, I think, in my life, even with my own mom, after she punched me in the face, and I would sit on the other side of the door just trying to lock her out and keep myself safe. And so those moments for me were, very much similar in that sense.
Yeah.
And I knew that I needed to get out. And so I started this plan of saving money to be able to get into a condo by myself. I started secretly seeing a therapist so that I could build my confidence to say, I want to leave and I need to get
Mhm.
out.
Wow.
And so I went behind his back and I rented a condo and I put down 3 months worth of rent so that it was mine and it was safe. And I just needed to find him the right time to say that I need to get out. And I think I said the words that I needed some time for myself to think, to kind of, you know, be on my own and work on our marriage and that sort of thing. And I begged my parents to come and help me move out. And so I did. And so
Wow.
I got out. And even while I was on my own, if I had ever had to go see him to deliver divorce papers or whatnot, or tell him that I was moving, I was supposed to move to Toronto for work. I would leave a note in my sweater drawer saying, if anything ever happens to me, it was because of him. And so these were the moments that um, I realized that if I had not ignored the red flags in the beginning, that I wouldn't have never had to make. But
Yeah.
I'm very thankful for being able to get out.
Yeah. And I want to take a moment just to honor you
Thank you.
because you made some really tough decisions that a lot
Mhm.
of people aren't able to make
Right,
or don't choose to make based on whatever the situation is.
right.
My mom didn't make the decision to leave, and
Mhm.
so I've seen what happens when they stay.
Right.
So I really just wanted to take a moment to honor you because I mean to even think forward like that. I mean, I paid for a place for 3 months. Like
Yeah.
so and you were and then to go seek a therapist, like these are things that especially depending on how we grew up, especially if you're taught not to talk about things
Right.
or be quiet, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not easy to go seek out a therapist.
No, especially when
I
you
know
don't have
that firsthand,
family,
right? Like,
right? It's like what alternative do you have, right? When you don't have a family that, will openly talk to you about it. And it was funny because the first night when I left, and this for me too was difficult because I found myself. So my brother, my mom, and my dad came to help me move. And I didn't ask my brother to come, but they thought, well, he's an extra set of hands to lift a couch and
they didn't
whatnot.
know, right?
They didn't know anything. And so we sat there in my 1,200 square foot condo, sitting at the dining room table eating pizza that very first night. And my mom said, she goes, okay, so tell me what really is the matter. What really happened between you and him? Because I didn't tell her anything about, like, nothing about the abuse, right?
Mm,
And so I slowly tiptoed into it. I told her about being on the floor. I told her about the cheating accusations. I told her about the fights. I told her about the things that he said, the threats. And she took a bite of her pizza and she looked at me and she said, well, thank God you kept your legs closed. And so I was at the ultimate lowest vulnerable point and hoping that she would just say, my God, you're so strong, or I'm so proud of you, or what you could have told me. Right. So I knew that I never had that support that I needed. And I knew I had to do it on my own. And I knew that before I even left. So that's why a therapist for me was the one person that I thought could help me the most.
wow. Wow. So how old, because you said you were with him for a few years. So how old were you
Yeah.
by this time?
So I was 26 at this time.
Okay.
And
So still
so
young.
still really young.
Yeah.
And thank God I had an education and a job that I could work my ass off and climb as high as I could, even with, by that time I wasn't making six figures. I was making maybe 60,000 a year, but enough that I could try and, I didn't have
Yeah.
kids. I just
Yeah.
strum a little away as much as I could to be able to save it up and hide it. And that's how I managed to make it work. And I was still paying for his credit card, my credit card, car loans, like all of that throughout the entire time that I
Wow.
was gone. And we were still married. So yeah, it was quite that moment. And so then I was supposed to go to Toronto for work. And my dad actually became sick over Christmas and was diagnosed with stage 4 tonsil cancer.
Wow.
And so we're only 6 hours apart right now. And I thought I need to be close to him just in case I need to get home as soon as possible.
Right.
And so I turned down a position in Toronto to stay here. But by that time, I had already asked my ex for a divorce and left it at that. And so it wasn't a year later that I met my current husband. And
Okay.
there's some happy positives. So he came into the
I was gonna say,
picture,
how are we overcoming these things?
right? And so,
Right.
so that entire year I continued
Oh my
therapy, right?
gosh.
And so it wasn't necessarily anything about the trauma of being a child and my mom and that sort of thing that I wasn't dealing with any of that yet. I was
Hmm.
purely just dealing with confidence and being able to have higher expectations of
The
somebody, of a
here and
partner.
now kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so trying to get over, the spousal piece of it.
Hmm.
And so I met my current husband, and he had never been married before, so we thought of it as like, okay, one of us has taken one for the team. We've already gotten a divorce under our belt, so we should be good.
Isn't that
We
interesting how when not to put, put that lightly, but it's like, I already took one for the team, so I already know what
Yes,
this one thing looks like.
right. It's like when we
Oh
started it,
man.
God, we were so young and naive. But when I think about it, it's like, okay, he was 30, I was 27-ish, right? Like
Hmm.
26. So yeah, we were living and loving in just like this laughter of this lightness of being happy and trusting each other. And he's actually from Saskatchewan as well. And so we had that kind of in common. And within a year of dating, he proposed with a ring that he bought himself without me knowing. It was quite this like magical
It's
moment
already
that I
better.
right, already better. Okay, that's check. And there's no lying, there's no
Oh
cheating. Okay,
goodness.
check. And so he started and created the safe space for me. And
Okay.
so we ended up having our first daughter. I think we were pregnant within 3 months. And then, so it really started fast for us. So we didn't really have those moments of being able to really dive into,
Yeah.
childhood and that sort of thing. And so, I think the first year for everybody of having a kid is crazy, right? Like
Yes.
as a mother, you feel like you're like, I'm drowning in breast milk and excess body
That's
fat and, sweat and just hormones and grossness. That I felt like I was a bit alone. And
mm,
so we ended up seeing a therapist just to understand the balance of work and expectations between each other and that sort of
mm,
thing. And then that's when I learned about my mom and her borderline narcissistic personality disorder. So it was this amazing gift that I received from going to therapy now
mm,
again. Right. And
mm.
so I spent the next, I want to say 10 years understanding borderline narcissistic personality disorder. I
Oh,
read every single book that I possibly could about it. I learned about boundaries and about grieving the mother
mm,
that I wish that I had always had.
oof.
And so it was extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And because of that, that I was able to shift and heal my own self from that standpoint of that childhood piece that my husband Adam and we became even stronger because of it.
Mm.
He was able to understand me and my triggers. And, not only was he understanding my ex-husband and those triggers, but now he had this extra baggage that he's trying to understand as well. So bless his heart, he's done very
I was
well.
gonna say, at least he tried though. And
He
that's to
did.
say a lot for him, because
Yes.
there's a lot of people who
Cut and
don't
run.
even know. And it's not I don't even want to say it's not that they don't want to try, they just don't know how to.
Right.
And so
Yes.
even the fact that he was able to at least try,
Right.
That's huge.
It's,
And
yeah,
we
it's
do need that. Like that's one thing that a lot of people don't understand when we have endured whatever type of trauma it is and we didn't have that safe space.
right.
We
Yes.
are yearning for that.
Yes. And it's funny because I would not be in the position that I am today had it not been for him. Like
Mm,
I have had so many people read this book, men even, that have said by being able to read and see your husband's actions, words, reactions, support, he has inspired me to be a better husband.
wow.
Yeah. So, like, in that sense as well, like, it is such a powerful book to be able to say, I've actually had another reader. She took the book, she read it, and she was obviously triggered by her own
Yeah.
experiences. And so she didn't know how to approach it with her husband. And so
Mm,
she gave the book to him and said, "This is me." And this was a tool for him to be able to read it, to understand her, and then also to be given that example of how to respond, how to act, how to show support, how to
yeah.
love somebody through it by giving them a safe space.
Mm,
So it really is, I couldn't have, I'm so proud of it. I really am.
wow. Well, I'm proud of you. I'm
Oh,
proud of you
thanks.
because I
Thanks.
that is a huge accomplishment to be able to tell your story in a vulnerable place.
Hmm.
Um, and like you said, I mean, I love that you did share both sides because I think
Yeah,
that is very important. A lot of men don't it and it's nothing, not to say anything negative, but they just don't always have it in them
totally.
to be that,
Yeah.
right?
Well, they think
And
if they're a provider, right? And like I have a job to do, I go to
yes,
work, I pay the bills, like
check the
that's
boxes.
check it and that's it, right? It's
I
like,
say yes, I say that all the time. Check the box, but when you have someone when you have your other person, your spouse who is going, and like I didn't face my traumas until well into my 40s. So I want to honor you
right.
for being
Yeah.
way earlier than that. I'm grateful I still did it though. So
Yes.
I don't look back and I don't ever
I'm an
say
old
like
soul, I swear. I'm a
that's
65-year-old in a 40-year-old
you're
body.
so
It's
funny.
okay.
But no, I mean, but we have to do that. And
Right.
so good on you for doing that, doing the work. It takes a lot of work. That's a lot of people don't understand. It takes a lot of work, but
Mhm.
coming out of that
Oh,
can be
if
so beautiful.
it feels so good.
Yeah.
I would say that if I didn't have my two daughters, I don't know if, that in itself that I would be in the same position. I was so scared of having boys. I really was. I think
Oh
because
my goodness.
I would fear that I would favor them or that I would not be able to love them or
Mm,
that, they would the generational trauma that has happened to, my mom, even though, right? Like she had her own experience with childhood sexual abuse and her brother, right?
wow.
And then she just,
Wow.
yeah. So we'll regress here, but like, when I came out to her, she told me of her own experience. And so it made me really upset that as a mother, you would not be self-aware to be able to say, my brother did that to me. I'm going to talk about boundaries and I'm going to talk about distance between what is safe and what is okay and consent. And when I was in grade 5, I was full blown grown breast development.
Oh wow.
She was still forcing my brother and I to bathe together. So she was
Oh.
providing this access instead of prohibiting it and instead of putting a restriction or a boundary between the two of us. And so I feel like in some way, shape, or form, I blame her in addition to my brother for it, right? Like it was something that, should have been acknowledged, should have been dealt with, should have been, cut. And so because she was never able to break that
Yeah.
generational trauma, it had just continued and continued and continued. And so, when it came to myself, God, I was scared of having boys. I really was, because I thought,
Mm,
how difficult is this going to be able to break this generational chain? And so the fact that I had girls, they made it my entire purpose in life to be the mother that I wish that I had for them, to give them a different life, to love them unconditionally, and to inspire them to be so much better in their life, to love them, to support them, to give them the confidence and the strength to stand up and say, no, thank you.
Mm,
So it really has been my purpose. And I knew that I couldn't be that for them if I didn't deal with my own baggage.
that, yeah,
Right.
yeah,
So
yeah,
kudos to my husband as well for handling the mom baggage, the ex-husband
yes.
baggage, the brother baggage. So it's just I swear that's all the baggage I have.
That's so
There's
funny.
there's nothing else.
Well,
So
one thing I tell people, and it's something that I'm learning, I've learned over the last few years when I finally did take the time to look back at my life, is you take your baggage with you everywhere you go.
right.
Like
Yes.
I went in the military, and when I went in the military, I was literally running away. Like that was,
Right.
I was
Yeah.
like, I got to get out of here, right? But I
Yes.
took it with me. And so
Right.
I was literally inviting toxic situations into my life
Mm-hmm.
without
Mm-hmm.
even, paying attention. And, so it definitely, I mean, I can't say it enough, because we are making a choice to break the generational trauma.
We are.
So that that is just so huge,
Yeah.
and your girls are going to, I mean, they're so much younger, and I will say, I try not to do this. I do it at a different angle, because before it was kind of guilt. Like, I wish I had done that, earlier.
Right.
Now it's
Yes.
more acknowledgement, I
Yeah.
think. Where I'll be like, gosh, because I didn't understand her at the age that I was going through, certain things,
Right.
right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that became a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
That became a challenge, and I only knew how to keep going.
Right.
So I never faced it, right? And it
Right.
did start, especially as she was getting older, it started coming out in different ways. But because of that, that's when I made the choice, and I said, okay, I gotta figure out what's going on.
Right.
And that
Yeah.
was a journey in itself. But
Right. Do
yeah,
you feel
so
like your time, serving, did that ever affect your trauma? Did it make it worse? Did
oh, it made
it,
it much worse. There was
right,
military
compounded?
sexual trauma,
Oh,
shut up in color. I talk about this all the time. Yes, because I'm, yeah. Uh Yeah, it definitely compounded. It definitely
wow.
compounded the trauma, but because I was so used to suppressing, compartmentalizing, I
Yeah.
never talked about stuff,
Right.
and it was such a stigma to go to mental health.
Right.
I was a female on the flight line with mostly men, so it was a male
Mm-hmm.
dominated career field. So
Yep.
I'm already, perceived as weak, right?
Right.
Because I'm a
Right.
female. So I always had to prove myself, which is how I grew up, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're
Yes.
always trying to prove
Yeah.
yourself. You're always
Mm-hmm.
trying to get, make sure you're not the weak link or
That's right.
whatever. Yep. And so being in the military, I found myself in the same situation. And so it wasn't until I got out, and that's when things started surfacing. And I do appreciate my daughter. And one day she'll know this, because I have told her, but I think it goes with one ear and not the other. She's not ready to receive it yet. But I appreciate her, because when she was 9, and, we started going at it, like, because I'm reactive and then she's
Right.
reactive. And what happened was I finally stepped back. Like you said, it's like you got to step back.
You got to pull out. Yep.
And when you step back and really look at the entire scenario, and then I was like, wait, I gotta turn the mirror around.
Right.
So that's when I started writing my book, because it was just that was the journey I was on,
Right.
and so
Wow.
I do appreciate, and our kids, they will show us what we need to work on.
Oh, yes, they
We just
will.
have to be open to we have to be open to receiving that,
Right.
because it is
Mm-hmm.
hard. We're both parents, for anybody out there listening, if you're a parent, you probably know this, right? Especially if your kids are a little bit older. It is difficult when your kids are showing you kind of what's wrong with you. right?
Right.
Because that's not what you want.
No.
You're supposed to be guiding them and then, helping them be better, and they in turn are showing you that you need to be better.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because they do, right? They really do. And even at a young age, like my 7-year-old, she's very feisty and scary and love her to pieces.
I had
But
one
she
of
said,
those.
right, she said to me, when somebody comes over and you frantically tidy your house prior to them coming over.
Yes.
So for me, that was always something that I was taught as a child, right?
Hmm.
Like I just portray the perfection, right? And
Yeah.
this image of perfection. And that was very much our family. And it was,
Hmm.
we don't tell anybody our secrets and all that kind of stuff. So I
Make it
had been
look pretty
doing
kind of thing, right?
right. I
It's like
had been
make it look pretty.
doing that. And she goes, Mom, like why do you always make us clean before people come over? And I said, well, because like you don't want people to think you're a slob. And she goes, but Mom, don't you think that their houses look like this too?
Ooh,
I was like, damn it,
you
you're
wild
7.
soul.
What? I know. And so I was just like, oh, okay, fine. I'm not going to make you vacuum, but let's just pick up the stuff off the floor and, that kind of thing. So
It
it's
is one of those things that does, I think, get programmed. I mean, I remember my grandmother doing it, and it's like, yeah, now I say, because people I'll catch people and they'll be like, well, don't judge me based on my house.
right. Yes.
Well, I could care less what your house I'm coming to see you, right?
Right.
Like, and it is one of those things where I actually had to look at that too, where it's like, yeah, why am I stressing myself out? I need
Yeah.
people who want the real me, not the fake, pretty on the
Right.
outside, whatever, like clean up the house kind of me. Like, I need
Yeah.
the people who can come to your house when it's messy are your people.
And love you all the same, right? Like those are your people. And it's funny because like I
Right.
feel like sharing all of this truth and this trauma, there's been certain individuals that have really embraced it, that have come forward with their own, that have,
Mm.
you know, um, the supporters, you really bring them so much closer. And those that have stood back and have said, oh, it's just kids stuff, or, that have said like, oh, I can't believe you didn't blame your dad, for more of it.
Mm.
He was living in the house too. And, there's been lots
You're
of
always
that.
going to have those.
You're
You're
always going to have
always going to
those
have those because, and you have to remember that people are operating out of their own trauma too,
for
right?
sure.
Or the fact that they didn't have that. So they don't even know. They have no
Right.
idea. So
Right.
they're just looking at it. So yeah, definitely. I had to learn that too, where we have to sometimes just silence the noise.
Yeah. You bring those that love you so much closer.
Yes.
And you only hope that, and I've said this so many times, is that I never wrote this book to put blame or to, point out who
Right.
has abused me or has wronged me or, shame anybody else. I didn't write it to, spill all the tea and the dirty secrets about my family and, you
Right.
know, send out all the juice to everybody. I really didn't. It was about inspiring those that have experienced something to be able to come forth, to ignite their healing, to be able to live a life of happiness after their trauma, and
Yeah.
that they can too, right? That they can be inspired by it.
Yeah.
And so yeah. So
And
some people,
those are your people, and
those are,
that's what we have to understand. There's going to be the people that just don't get it, and that's okay.
yeah.
I'm gonna love
But
you where you are.
totally. And but like for those that are listening, to not feel like you can't come forward because
Yeah,
of that, share your story to
yeah.
even just a therapist or to myself even, reach out, send me a message, because I can
Hmm.
be that person who doesn't know you but will love you and support you
Hmm.
regardless of what you've been through.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. And that's beautiful. It's interesting because you were talking about tidying your house and things like that. You have an organizing business
Well, it's
where you
organized, it's
clean,
interior,
correct?
no, it's interior design. And so
Okay, okay. Because I
it
was looking at it and I was like, okay, it's organizing. I did see the
I
interior
did some,
design.
yeah. So there's
Okay,
some organizing. Like I do mostly children's interior design, and
I
so
saw
for
that.
me, it didn't click, I guess, right away. But for me, when I was a little girl, my safest space was my bedroom. And
Mm-hmm.
so I couldn't control my environment, but
Right.
within those four walls, when I was by myself, even though there was never a lock on the door, that for me felt the safest. And
Mm,
so, and the quietest, right? The most
right.
peaceful. And so, after I had worked 10 years in the corporate world, I decided to open up my own children's interior design company. And
Wow.
so it was about creating these safe, serene spaces for kids to be able to have. And, as much as I think that I can affect their world as a kid, that was my way of being able to
Hmm.
change their world for them.
Amber, that is beautiful.
Yeah. So
That is
thank you. So
beautiful.
I'll never do a crazy room. I don't like those. There's not like reds and yellows and
Yeah,
stripes
you like
and
the
no.
serenity and
I
no, but
like
that
the
that makes
peaceful.
total sense. You know,
Yeah.
I'm finally in a place in my life too where I'm just like, I just want peace.
Yes.
I just want peace. You
Yeah.
know, and I think sometimes because I was actually having this conversation the other day, because I don't know about you, but even noises, certain noises bother me now.
Yes.
So
Very
I
much
was on
so.
the flight line and I had machines everywhere. No big deal. I was so used to noise. It never bothered me. But
Hmm.
when I started, you know, facing my trauma and going through
Yeah.
EMDR and all the trauma therapies, like certain noises
Yeah.
just drive me. So
Yeah.
the
My
okay.
yeah. My girls would tell you the same
I
thing. It's
did
like,
do some research on it. It actually is
yeah,
very
it's true.
common. So I'm
Yeah.
glad to know that I'm not glad, but you know what I mean. It's
Yeah. It's
like,
comforting to know.
yay, we're not
Yeah.
alone, right?
Yay.
I
I'm
think
not a complete psycho.
that's why we have to share our stories. That's
Yeah.
why.
It normalizes
It
it, right? Like
normalizes it. Yes.
I like when I was younger, it took me up until I was probably mid 20s to allow somebody to touch my face, which
Mm,
which sounds like a weird thing, right? And I didn't
it's not
realize it.
though.
It's
Yeah.
all from sexual abuse. And it was one of the key triggers that I'm like flipping through the pages and I'm like, oh my God, I have that. And I have this as well. And
Mm-hmm.
for somebody to stand behind me, I can't have that. Right. It's
Yes.
another one. The noises, the repetitive noises. If my kids will tell you, if you ever want to piss me off, you just repeat noises and it drives me bonkers. I get very overstimulated when there's too much
Me
going on.
too. Me
So,
too. I was just telling a friend that the other day because she's in, she's got kids and she's used to chaos and so she was sending me a video recording and I was trying to pay attention to what she was saying, but there was a saw in the background and it
yeah,
really was driving me crazy.
yeah,
I couldn't focus on what she was saying. And I said, I couldn't listen. I
yeah.
told her I said I couldn't listen. And it's but we have to be able to communicate that with people because,
Hmm.
not everybody experiences that. And,
Right.
that's what I tell people when you actually get away from it for a while and then you start kind of thinking about healing through these things that have come up because it's just part of our suppression, right? It's just
Right.
we're
Yeah.
suppressing noises too.
Yeah.
But when
Yeah.
things start coming out,
Hmm.
all of it comes out.
Right. Yeah, it does.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, it's funny too, even like disassociation was something that I was very, very good at. It
Mm-hmm.
was a way, like even through relationships and that sort of thing, it was in any type of intimate situation, I would just disassociate immediately.
Yes.
It was just like a job for me,
I can
right? It was
relate to that.
just you just
Yes.
check the box, you get her done and
That's
move
it.
on. And so, and now I find myself being in the position of being almost like hypersensitive, right? To noises, to smells, to,
Yes.
what's happening on in the background, like all of those kinds of things that
Yeah.
yeah, it's the opposite.
I completely relate. It's
Hmm.
the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very, very hypersensitive. Um, wow. That just helped me out because sometimes I'll tell people these things and they'll just kind of look at me like people don't understand. I do have a couple friends that look out for me, but because they know. But
Hmm.
there was a point, when people like leaf blowers,
Yes.
weed
Oh,
eaters, I'm just like, stop.
yeah.
Right? So I always have to put in my noise canceling headphones and oh my goodness. So That's interesting. You know, because I have read a lot about it and I
Yeah.
already knew I wasn't alone. Okay, there's a lot of studies on this. This is actually kind of normal. All right, cool.
Hmm.
But now to actually meet someone
Yeah.
else who has endured that, that is very interesting. So
Yeah, I think a lot of it too, right, is when you get triggered or, there's certain things in life that obviously come up. It's funny. So we were just watching the Menendez, the Monsters
oh
Netflix.
gosh, yes.
So for me, obviously, I think it was one of the first times that I've sat there and where there was any type of childhood sexual abuse.
Yeah,
And so my husband was sitting with me and we're watching it. And I said, you know what? Man, am I thankful that you know everything because now I don't have to feel uncomfortable in this
right.
moment, right? Whereas back when Game of Thrones was happening, the first
Mm,
episode of the first season, there was a brother sister incident of abuse.
oh
And I
goodness.
sat there frigid and frozen, my entire
I
body just
bet.
stiff, thinking like, oh my God, how do I not feel this right now?
Right.
So I think as we get triggered, and I think as we go through those experiences and we see bits and pieces of like, oh my God, I'm so overstimulated, or the face issues or people behind me, or when you
Yes.
feel these uncomfortable moments that are coming up, being able to understand what has produced that, why
Yes.
it's there, that it is a part of you, and that's okay,
Yeah.
and that to give yourself that forgiveness that at some point you may overcome that, but if you don't, it's still okay.
That's okay. Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
okay.
because I don't like, yeah, I'll be at a restaurant, I always have to face out. I always have
Yeah.
to be able to see the
Yes.
door. I don't I can
Yeah.
totally relate to what you're saying.
Hmm.
I found out that I'm not the complete extrovert that I used to think I was. You know, like
Yes.
there's all these
Yes.
little things that, I don't desire a ton of people around me anymore.
No.
Um,
Nope. I'm the
it's
same way.
actually very uncomfortable now. But that
Hmm.
used to not bother me, but
Right.
that's what happens. It's like our brain just shuts off these
Hmm.
centers when we've
Yes.
endured so much trauma. It's like we just learn how to cope.
Right. Yeah,
Whew.
you do. It's just kind of like you keep going and you get by the best that you can. And when you hit almost 40, it just blows up in your face.
Well, keep going. That's what I tell people. Once you start this journey, it doesn't ever stop. I'm learning
It
that in my
doesn't.
life, but I'm grateful for it. And we
Yes.
have to embrace it, and
Right.
you're able to teach your daughters that. Like I'm hoping that my daughter finally kind of accepts that this is mom growing and she's
Yeah,
trying to evolve, and I hope that she's able to see that at some point in her life.
she
So
will.
that's what it's for, and we're able to inspire others by
Yes.
doing this, that's what I tell people. And like you said earlier, you don't have to share your story publicly,
No.
but you guys, the more you compress, the more you compartmentalize, it's gonna
Hmm.
come out in areas. I mean, I found that I had heightened pain in certain, I had chronic
Hmm.
pain that was getting worse, right? Like you said,
Yeah. Yep.
MS symptoms, right?
Yep.
It's going to come out. And
Yeah.
so I just want to encourage anyone out there, like you said, like Amber said, talk to someone. You don't
Right.
have to
Anybody.
out your story publicly like we're doing. We've gone through a lot to get here, so just remember that.
Yeah.
But definitely seek the right person too.
Right.
And if you don't find the right person right off, that's okay. Don't give up.
Right.
Don't give
Yep.
up. Because that happened with me too. So
Yeah,
don't give
therapists are
up.
a very like particular thing, right? I think interviewing somebody or having that first 15-minute call with
Mhm.
somebody just to see if, you feel that safety, you feel that like you could jive or connect with them
Yeah.
is a big piece of it. And
Yeah.
providing yourself a trustful, safe situation is probably one of the best things that you can do, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're going to allow yourself to be vulnerable, you need to have that.
Yeah. So what would you tell? I want to think about the next generation or the generation. I think about my daughter's age all the time, the teenagers,
Yes.
because
Yeah,
that's a very big age.
it
I think about my
is.
own teenage, right? You think about your
Yes.
teenage, like what everything that impacted us. So if you were speaking to a group of teenagers and
Hmm.
you have no idea who's going through
Right.
what would you tell them how to begin the journey of overcoming whatever they're going through?
That's a great question. I think obviously finding that one trustful person, right? I tell my girls all the time that it's five trustful people that you can feel that your safety circle.
Mm,
We've started talking to them about boundaries, consent, body positivity, all of that kind of thing, just so that they know they can always say no.
yeah.
But we teach them about the safe five, the five people in their life in the circle of trust that they can have, that they can go to at any time with any given problem.
Yeah.
So it's myself, my husband, grandparents, a teacher, a therapist, a doctor. And so I would say to any teenager as well that it would be the exact same thing to have. It may not be a friend, right? Because a friend's probably not going to tell you
Yeah.
exactly what you
Well,
need
especially
to
in today's
hear.
world, they have social media, they have all the
Yeah.
things, right? So it's like people are, and even adults, it's like a lot of people are afraid to talk because there's so
Yes.
much access now.
Right. And so I think that one-on-one safe person that you can provide is a key, is very, very big thing for them. I
Mhm.
think too, when it comes to body positivity, being able to know your worth, being able to say no, being able to value yourself and your virginity, being able to be a sex positive person, yes, but knowing the right person, the right time, and being able to have those open conversations with your safe person to say what is okay and what is not. And
Yeah.
so there was a moment that I describe in my book as well about my daughter, my oldest, when I was going through everything and I was crying a lot, and she said, "Mommy, are you sad? Are you sad with us?" And
Mm,
so it really broke my heart. And
yeah.
so I took her upstairs, I sat her down on her bed, and we sat holding hands. And I said, I explained the situation of what had happened when I was a young girl and that it was inappropriate touching, didn't get into
Mm,
details. She was
right.
8.
Yeah.
Um, but for me, it was just allowing her and reminding her that she's in charge of her own body. She can say no at any given time, regardless if it is somebody that is supposed to be a trusted advisor, like a doctor, for example,
Right.
that she can say no, even if they tell her that it's okay. Um, and so it's always been something that we've spoken about very openly.
Mm,
And I think teenagers nowadays need to remember
yeah.
that it's not about going out there and sleeping with every guy that you possibly can be because everybody else is doing it, that we can still value ourselves and value what we want in our lives. So,
Mm,
yeah,
that's
I think those
beautiful.
open conversations are a big thing. And as much
Yeah.
as my girls will probably never want to talk to me when they turn 13, I will always make sure that they love and trust
Hey,
me enough
that's
to do so.
okay. I don't know. I think you're gonna be okay because
Yeah.
you're building that now, and
Yes.
that's huge.
Yeah.
So I think you're gonna be fine. I look forward to hearing about it and staying in contact.
Yes, yes. Oh, I'm sure that they will definitely, push the envelope and the boundaries. I'm
Yeah,
sure of it. But
yeah.
but my husband and I, we've done a really good job of raising strong feminists, and they're spicy. They are. And I think too, like when we talk about raising kids in the next generation, it's so important to teach our boys the exact same thing, right? To have them value a woman's body, right?
Yes,
To value consent and to be able to
yes.
say, is it okay if I do this, right? Because even like my generation never had that. It
We
was just
did.
kind of like
Mhm.
you snowball and it's happening and there's no asking. You're just,
Right,
even if you freeze, it's still going
right.
to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think raising young boys with that intention as well, and helping them understand that they have to ask, that we're not here just for their taking.
Yeah.
So that's
Mm,
important too.
that's beautiful. Thank you for that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So every parent out there
Yes.
and coaches and mentors and teachers, these are all things that we have to be willing to talk about,
Mhm.
because like you said, it wasn't normal for us, but we can change that. We can
That's
change
right.
that. We can make it normal for them.
And if you have kids that are 8, 9, 10, you should have been on it by now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you should have started it a long time ago, because
Yeah.
sexual activity, and it's happening sooner and
It's
sooner than we like
happening
to think.
earlier.
So
Yeah,
have the
it's happening
conversations.
earlier.
Yes.
Definitely.
So
Yeah. Well, Amber, it has been an absolute pleasure
Oh,
to have
thank
you on
you.
today. And, just I can't wait to get into your book. But you
Oh,
guys definitely go get her book and, let's support her as much as possible. I know how difficult it is to begin the journey and then stay consistent and then especially to share the journey.
yes.
That can be very difficult. And so again, I just want to honor you for
Thank you
all the
so
work that you're
much.
doing and
Thank
for your
you.
support system, your husband too. Kudos
Oh
to
my
him.
gosh, yes. Snaps for Adam. My gosh. He yes, absolutely. I do
And
want to
even
say
though
that,
there's rough patches, like you were talking about
oh,
earlier, and that's every marriage has that.
yes.
It's how you overcome it that matters,
It's
right?
yeah, it's how you weather through it, right?
Yes.
And it really is about we've always said that on the big things, we've been very, very aligned. And
Yeah.
it's the small
That's
things,
good.
like what are we watching tonight? Or you're going out again, or you're golfing again, right? Like those are the little things that, yeah, we would still argue about, but every
Yeah,
single marriage is the same. And it really is how you weather them, how you stand beside each other
definitely.
and stand with an open heart and an open mind to support what
Yeah.
your partner's been through. But
Yeah.
I do want to say that I am donating a portion of all proceeds from the Obedient Daughter to local charities, as well as any avenues that support sexual health and sexual assault and victims of sexual assault.
Mm.
We've provided a large portion here to Calgary Communities Against Sexual Abuse. And they support victims through any type of trauma that they've been through therapy, through legal advice, any type of support that they need to get them on their way and healing in a safer space.
I love it.
Thank you.
I
Thank
love
you.
it. Thank you again. Thank you for the time. Thank you for sharing. I know I was inspired, so I can only imagine that there's going to be a lot of other people inspired by your story. So keep
Oh,
sharing it. Keep
thank you
sharing
so
it.
much. I will keep
You're welcome.
sharing, and I do ask all of those that if you do have a book, you've read it, donate it to a community mailbox, to any type of those little libraries that are standing up, or buy an extra copy, give it to a friend. If you know a friend that is going through any type of health scare, or they're not sure, they're not finding a diagnosis, perhaps it's trauma showing up in their body, give them a copy of the book as well.
Mm,
And hopefully that they can acknowledge and find a happier life.
mm, I love that.
Yeah.
All right, Amber.
Thank
We're
you.
gonna close for today, you guys, but definitely make sure that you stay in contact with her. I'll have her information written out. So just make sure you stay in contact, you support her, support the mission. Being able to take your pain and purpose that into a greater cause is huge. So definitely want to honor you and just I'll probably be one of your biggest fans. So
Oh, thank you so much, Jody.
all right, you guys, it's been another episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and let's keep sharing our stories one story at a time. Have a great day.